You're listening to the Nutrition Experts Podcast, featuring guests who take the scientific talk about food and break it down for practical use. You've heard the phrase, "You are what you eat." Come find out what that really means. Experience conversations with experts in the field of nutrition and understand the power of food for our health, well-being, and beyond. Now, here's your host, registered dietitian and nutritionist, Mathea Ford.
Hey there, it's Mathea. Welcome back to the Nutrition Experts Podcast, the podcast featuring nutrition experts who are leading the way using food starts today, right now, with our next guest. It's great to have Janice Bissex on the show today. Janice, welcome to Nutrition Experts. I'm excited to have you on the show and share your expertise with my tribe.
Well, I'm excited to be on your show as well. Thanks for inviting me, Mathea.
Well, I just love this topic because it's something that dietitians, I think, don't know a whole lot about. Mm-hmm. And honestly, even here in Oklahoma, we just approved medical marijuana. We're going to talk about cannabis today. And even just talking to my doctor, like, how are you thinking about implementing this type of stuff? There's a little bit of fear. Still a little bit. So I would love you just to start with telling my listeners a little bit more about you and what you do.
Okay. Well, let's see. I've been a registered dietitian nutritionist for a few decades, and I've done everything from cardiac rehab to selling nutrition software, working at a luxury hotel, and then I co-founded Meal Makeover Moms with a nutrition colleague. For almost 15 years, we wrote 5 books, and we taught busy families how to eat a healthy diet. And that was all great. I enjoyed that and being the sort of family nutrition expert, and that was good. And then a couple of years ago, my dad was sick. He suffered multiple spinal fractures, and he was in a lot of pain. And he was put on the traditional pain meds, and they had terrible side effects. They made him a zombie. He became excruciatingly constipated that required a hospitalization. So finally I said to his doctor, isn't there anything else that we can do for him to help manage his pain? And I said, what about medical marijuana? Now, Mathea, I honestly knew nothing about medical marijuana or cannabis in general. It just never really crossed my radar. I tried it once in college because I felt like I should do that before I leave. But that was it. That was my big, experience with cannabis. So the doctor looked at me and he said, "I think that's a great idea." And I thought, oh boy, well now I need to learn about it. So I started to learn about it. I took my dad to get certified to a doctor. He got a vape pen with medical marijuana, and we came home. He was in a lot of pain, and he took 2 puffs, and he said, "Wow." And I said, are you okay? And he said, "I'm not in pain." And right then I said, this is it. I am completely changing my career focus. I am going to go back to school to learn about cannabis and find out, why does it work? I had no idea why it worked. And that's what I decided to do, and I basically haven't looked back since.
Wow, that's an excellent story, just even that personal moment to say it worked that quick.
Mm-hmm. And it was just so surprising to me because I wasn't in tune to that. And I don't want to say I was angry, but I thought, here's something that can help people without all those terrible side effects from opioids and other pain meds, and we don't know about it. Why are we not being told about this? Well, the first obvious answer is that on the federal level, cannabis is illegal. So that's the reason that we aren't really told about it. And yet, 30 states, Oklahoma, welcome aboard, 30th state to legalize medical marijuana. 30 states, it is legal. So, but doctors don't know about it. They really don't. They weren't trained. You and I weren't trained in this. I mean, I didn't know anything about cannabis. So it's really the last decade or two that the medical benefits have become more widely known. Now, it's been used medicinally for 10,000 years. Back in Chinese medicine, it was used in India. It's been used throughout time. And then it became sort of demonized in the early 1900s. And there was a big, just say no, it's bad for you, it's the evil weed, it's going to, ruin your brain and all of that. So it was sort of pushed aside. And then over the last couple of decades, it's come back to light. So people now, they're doing more research around the world, not in the US because it's illegal. So there's a little bit of research being done here, but a lot of research done, especially in Israel, the Netherlands, places like that have some pretty good research showing the medical benefits of cannabis. So that is something that people are catching on to and saying, okay, wait a minute. If that's an option, why would I take these pharmaceuticals?
Especially that, can be addictive and cause a lot of problems. Can you tell us what it is about cannabis that causes it to work quickly and help with so many different conditions?
It all starts with the endocannabinoid system. And this was discovered in 1992. It's a neurotransmitter system in our bodies. And we actually produce at least 2 cannabinoids. So when you look at the cannabis plant, there are about 100 cannabinoids. They're just compounds in the plant, which every plant has different compounds that may give them health benefits. So cannabis has about 100. We produce 2 on our own, in our own bodies, anandamide, which is called the bliss molecule, and 2-AG. So we produce these cannabinoids, and the whole goal of this endocannabinoid system is to maintain homeostasis. So if your body doesn't produce enough anandamide, for example, the incidence of anxiety is much higher. Because anandamide can promote a feeling of well-being. It can potentiate your serotonin receptors. So those happy people that chances are they're producing a good amount of anandamide in their own bodies. So what happens is if you don't produce a lot of anandamide, then you could have more anxiety and depression. So if you introduce CBD or cannabis, and we'll talk about the difference between those in a minute. If you introduce that into your body by taking a tincture or a pill or vaping some cannabis flower, then that gets your whole system working better. So you're helping your own system produce more anandamide, and therefore you feel better. So it's kind of amazing. And I mentioned CBD, and CBD is one of the cannabinoids in cannabis. There's THC, which people more likely have heard of, and that's the cannabinoid that's responsible for the psychoactivity or the intoxication. So you could very well get high or stoned if you have a high THC cannabis or marijuana variety. CBD does not have the intoxicating side effect. So if you take CBD, you get a lot of the health benefits, like it's anti-anxiety that I spoke of, pain, decreases pain. So those neurotransmitters that I was talking about, so you've got a whole system where if you have pain in your body, the signal comes down the neurotransmitter and then it goes to the next one and it sends the pain signal down to your leg or wherever you have pain. So what cannabis does, or CBD does, is it interrupts that signal so that that pain signal isn't getting there. And another way that CBD decreases pain is that it's a potent anti-inflammatory. So inflammation is one of the causes of many of our chronic diseases. It's a contributing factor. So if you can take something that tones down the inflammation in your body, we talk about an anti-inflammatory diet. So we want to eat lots of vegetables and we want to, have these foods that are anti-inflammatory. Well, CBD does that. It is a plant, right? We're supposed to be eating a plant-based diet. So CBD is from the plant and it's a potent anti-inflammatory. So that's just another way that you see a decrease in pain using CBD or cannabis. The ratio of CBD to THC is something that everybody should look at when they're choosing a medicine. So some people actually require a little bit of THC. There's nothing wrong with THC. THC has medical value. It's just that a lot of the people that I work with don't want to be high. They don't want to be stoned. They just want relief. They want relief from muscle spasms, from pain, from anxiety, from insomnia without the high. So that's why the CBD has seen a lot more popularity recently.
Well, and I know that in most states, I believe CBD is legal because it does not contain the THC.
Yes. If you go strictly by the definition, it's legal in almost every state. There are some states that it's a little bit gray, and then at the federal level, they say that any derivatives of cannabis are illegal. I actually had someone call the DEA and say, so what's the deal? Is CBD legal or is it not legal? And the person at the DEA said, we are certainly not concerned with people consuming CBD. That's just not at the top of our radar. Now, the FDA, on the other hand, is cracking down on some manufacturers because right now with CBD showing people are really interested in it. So a lot of people are getting on board and saying, I'm going to sell CBD. And they're sourcing their CBD from around the world. They're on tight controls. They did tests and they found that more than half did not contain the CBD that the manufacturer said. So you really have to be careful buying CBD online from someone or some business that you don't really know is for real. And anyone who wants to buy CBD, they should ask for independent lab testing of the product.
Can you talk a little bit more about cannabis in general and kind of how it's available for people to use?
There are a lot of different ways that you can consume cannabis. Everyone knows about the smoking. You can smoke a joint, a pipe, a bong. So that's one way to get it. For the most part, smoking a joint, some people still like to do that, but some of the toxins go into your lung, and that's not my favorite way. And I don't have any clients that prefer that method of smoking. There is vaping, which is better than smoking because it burns at a lower temperature, a couple of 100 degrees lower, so you don't get those toxic byproducts. So if you decide to vape, when my dad first went to the dispensary, they gave him a vape pen with an oil cartridge, and you just looks like a little pen, and you breathe in, and you can get it that way. But most people turn to things like tinctures. So you can get a tincture that's oil-based or alcohol-based. The alcohol-based ones, I typically don't recommend. They're very, to put it under your tongue it doesn't taste good. It burns. So what I typically work with is an oil-based tincture. And you just put it under your tongue for a couple of minutes. It gets absorbed in about 10 or 15 minutes, and you see relief. You can also take a gel cap, a soft gel, and you say, okay, I want 25 milligrams of CBD every day to help me with inflammation, insomnia, pain, whatever. So you take the pill, and a lot of people like to do this just because they take it with their multivitamin or whatever medications they're already taking. And I advise people to take it with a fat source because that can extend the relief, the effect of the CBD or the cannabis. And that's another way to do it. Very easy. You just put a pill. There are also topical ways of administering cannabis or CBD, which I have seen amazing success. And it's a little balm or a salve or a cream, and you massage it wherever you hurt. So if your knuckles hurt from arthritis, or if your knee is painful, or a shoulder, or you have a muscle ache in the back. I have a young woman who is a runner, and she said, if I don't massage some CBD cream onto my back, I can't run. So it's pretty amazing. So that's another way that you can consume it. And you can use a CBD cream or a cannabis cream. It's absorbed just through the epidermis, so it doesn't go into your blood. So some people are worried about drug tests. And that's another thing. CBD will not cause a positive drug test? I've had that question a lot. THC is what they check for. Another way of administering CBD or cannabis is suppositories, which are pretty effective for things like colon cancer, people who have severe menstrual cramps. A suppository gets the medicine really right where you need it, and people have seen amazing results with that.
So that made me think a little bit about the endocannabinoid system. Hope I'm saying that right.
You are. Excellent.
Is it like our lymph nodes system, or is it like a circulatory system, or is it completely different?
It's completely different. It's more of a neurotransmitter system.
Okay.
Yeah. Even though the CBD, you've got these cannabinoids, and we have receptors in our body, and the CB1 receptors, which is mostly what THC effects are in the brain, which is why you get the high, and the spinal cord, and then the CB2 receptors, which CBD can have an effect on, are on our immune cells and on our organs. So that's the difference there. So when you take CBD, you get more of a body, not high, but you get relief, body relief, as opposed to THC giving you a little bit more of a head. It affects your head more. But another thing I just thought of is that people who have concussions, very important. CBD is a neuroprotectant. In fact, the U.S. government has a patent on CBD as a neuroprotectant and antioxidant. They got that patent in 2003. So they know that CBD is good for neuroprotection. So anyone who has a traumatic brain injury, a concussion. My neighbor had an accident surfing in January. He was surfing and the board went way up and he thought he was clear. So he took his hands off of his head and crack. He had a serious concussion. So I went right over there. I said, you need to take this CBD. And he did. And so it's important that people know that is an option for brain injury. In particular, our veterans coming home, they should absolutely be allowed to use cannabis and CBD.
Yeah, that will be an interesting thing with the VA being a federal organization.
Exactly. That is the challenge. So really my hope is in the next couple of years, I don't know if it'll be that soon, that cannabis will lose its Schedule 1 designation. So in 1970, they put cannabis in the same category as heroin and said there's no medical value and it has a high potential for abuse, and made it a Schedule 1 drug. And it's so not true, and yet there it stays. All the research is to the contrary, and yet for some reason our lawmakers are not willing to, take action to take it away from that Schedule 1 status, which is really preventing a lot of people from getting relief. If you're in one of the 20 states that doesn't allow medical marijuana, and you know that it's illegal, and you're 80 years old and in terrible pain, you're not going to do that. So I just really hope that we can make that happen. And part of that is working on the stigma, because there is still a huge stigma. And I'm not going to lie, 2 years ago, I was kind of there. I didn't know about all the medical benefits. And I was like, people, they just want to smoke and get high. And it's just so not true. I was a little judgy, about people who maybe turn to cannabis. I'm a dietitian. So, and now the more I learn, the more I say, I can't believe that we should be promoting this. This should be the first line defense against pain before going to the pharmaceuticals.
So what are some conditions that people use cannabis for?
Pain, anxiety, insomnia. Those are 3 big ones. Also, MS, inflammatory bowel disease, ulcerative colitis, and Crohn's. People have seen amazing results. I have a 22-year-old friend here in town, and he says that without cannabis, before cannabis, he didn't sleep through the night. He couldn't go to college. He said, I was in pain. Had to be near a bathroom. It was awful. And now with cannabis, because it's an antispasmodic, it's an anti-inflammatory, he sleeps through the night and he's now going to college. So to me, that right there, that's such a success story. I have some people with, some clients with Parkinson's disease. And I have this one gentleman who is just the sweetest man. And he sends me a note about once every month or two. And he says, okay, send me 2 more bottles of tincture. And he'll say things like, I haven't fallen in 43 days, which was not the case before he started taking it. It's amazing. MS, people with MS, it helps with the muscle spasticity, migraines. And
I'm interested to talk about migraines.
Yeah. So I've worked with a few people with migraines. One person who has just awful migraines almost daily. She tried just the CBD a few months ago, and she said, I really didn't see a lot of relief. Okay. So another client came and we did the CBD soft gels, and this is something new that I read, the CBD salve. So what she does is when she's getting a migraine, she massages this topical salve right where she feels the pain, whether it's between her brows, she gets it below her eye sockets. So she massages the CBD in there, and then she waits a few minutes, and then wherever the pain, they say, will then move because it doesn't like where you've put that. So it will move. And then she massages it to where it moves, and then one more time. And she said it can stop a migraine. Now, is it going to work for everybody? Nope. Does cannabis work for everybody? Nope. But I'm thinking about 85 to 90% of people can find relief using CBD and cannabis for a lot of these conditions.
Are there times, you said, is it going to work for everybody, but are there times when CBD or marijuana or cannabis is not appropriate for use in a person? I'm thinking pregnancy for sure, probably.
Right. Pregnancy and lactation, even though, there's some evidence that CBD is not at all, but I certainly wouldn't recommend that. Not at all a problem when you're breastfeeding. But for right now, until more research is done, I would say, yes, pregnancy and breastfeeding 2 times. And you'd think that I would say, and not for anyone under 21. But that's not true. That's not true. We have so many stories of young children who had 200 seizures a day. You may have seen the Sanjay Gupta, the documentary called Weed. And Sanjay, he was not a fan of medical cannabis or cannabis. He thought this is not something that we should be using. It's a slippery slope. And then he did this documentary. And he followed a little girl, Charlotte Figge, who was having 200 seizures a day. They gave her cannabis. And guess what? She started having a seizure a week. It's an amazing story. So a lot of kids with epilepsy have been helped in different seizure disorders. I find that the most exciting research right now is with autism. I have read some pretty interesting studies and have heard some anecdotal evidence about using CBD with autism. Because, CBD is a neurocalming agent. So if you can calm those, the electric impulses in the brain, and you can sort of calm that all down, they've seen an improvement in behavior in children with autism. So to me, that's very exciting. And also Alzheimer's disease. They've had some great results with Alzheimer's. Some of the people, when you go through, which I did with my aunt, they go through different phases, and sometimes they sort of reach out, they strike people, they go through that sort of violent stage. And again, the CBD and the cannabis have been shown to calm them and make them happier. And, isn't that really what our elderly population deserves? They deserve pain relief. They deserve to be happy in their older years. So I'm just such a huge proponent of figuring out what we can do to help people as they age to keep them happy and give them relief from their pain.
So you've mentioned some research a few times. Is there any specific research that shows about the effectiveness, or where is research being done and kind of what direction is it going?
I've got a lot of research studies on my website, so people can go to JannabisWellness.com. It's cannabis with a J, JannabisWellness.com, and I have a whole resources page. So for each condition, pain, I've got about 7 or 8 resources for, insomnia, for anxiety. So I would say people could go there. And like I said, there's not a lot of good research in this country, and people keep, using that as an excuse. Well, until we have, peer-reviewed, studies, we can't recommend it. Well, we can't do that because it's federally illegal.
Right, and they can't sponsor any studies.
Right. So if we can't do the studies because it's illegal, and yet we have research from other parts, Israel in particular, they're just so far ahead of us researching this. So until it's not federally illegal, we're not going to be able to do the widespread research that we want to do. And doctors will still say, well, we don't have enough research, so I can't say that you should try this. And some go so far as to say, my friend brought her 85-year-old mom who's in a lot of pain and said, would like to try CBD. The doctor said, I don't think that's a good idea. Now, what if my dad's doctor had said that? Well, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now, that's for sure. And, when you're in your 80s, if your doctor says don't do it, chances are you're not going to do it. So I find that to be very sad. And I don't blame the doctors for not understanding it, because we weren't trained in it. Unless, like I said, you've gone to med school in the last few years and you went to a med school that is enlightened and willing to train you and teach you about this, they don't know about it. So, that's a real struggle.
You mentioned a little bit about the ratio of the CBD to THC. What are some dosing recommendations, and does it vary based on the condition? Can you talk a little bit about that?
It varies based on the person. It varies based on the condition. It varies based on someone's endocannabinoid system. So you might need 2 milligrams of, let's say, CBD to find relief from your pain. And the next person might need 20. And the next person might need 40. It's so individual, more so than any other medication that I'm aware of. It all has to do with your system and your endocannabinoid system and your receptors and how many you have, and which makes it difficult for me working with people to dose them. So we usually I always say, start low and go slow. So you start with a lower dose. You might start with 5 milligrams. And this, I'm talking about CBD. If you're starting cannabis with THC, I would say you would start even lower, like 2 milligrams of THC. Because if you do have a reaction and you get high, that's kind of scary for a lot of people. So that's something you would just start low and then you just work your way up. And, when I was just saying that, it occurred to me, I didn't mention edibles when I told you about different ways that you can use cannabis. But edibles, which would be any food that contains cannabis, it's actually, people say, they're tricky, and they are tricky, especially if they contain THC, because an edible can take an hour or 2 to take effect. So people will take a little, let's say a 5 milligram dose of, I'm going to say a little chocolate square with THC, 5 milligrams, and they'll take it. And then 30, 40 minutes later, they say, yikes, I have no relief from my pain. I'm going to take another one. And they wait a half hour and they're like, this is really ridiculous. I'll take another one. And then all of a sudden at 2 hours, bam, they are high. They're paranoid. And those are the effects that we want to avoid, because once you've had that experience, you're not likely to go back and try it again. And cannabis is such a powerful tool that I hate to have people have that experience. So for sure with edibles, if you're trying an edible for the first time, you have to keep the THC very low, and you have to wait 2 hours to see if it will take effect before you would take another bite or another dose.
Is there something with regards to how much is absorbed? I know you mentioned it can take like an hour, but if you have a pill or a edible, when you get it, is it going to say 5 milligrams and you can expect to absorb 5 milligrams? Because we usually don't absorb all. So
exactly. No, and that's variable as well, how much you're actually going to absorb. And when you take an edible, if you take 5 milligrams of THC in an edible, it goes through your liver for processing. So there's an enzyme system, the CYP450 system, and you need that to break down your cannabis. If that system is being used to break down, let's say, alcohol or another drug, it can impact how much you absorb and how quickly it's broken down. And the other thing, when it's an edible, the THC is converted to a more potent form of THC when you take it as an edible. So that's the other thing. It's a lot of experimentation to see really what dose and what ratio of cannabinoids works best. A lot of people can see relief with just the CBD. Some people need some THC, whether it's for migraines, or I have a client with glioblastoma, and she has tumors in her brain, so she needs some THC because that's where the action is. And another thing with the CBD is that some people say, well, the pharmaceutical companies are coming out with a CBD isolate or a THC isolate. But to me, and to a lot of people, the beauty of cannabis is the whole plant. So there are 500 different compounds in cannabis. There are terpenes that are responsible for this aroma and the taste. There are flavonoids, which have health benefits, antioxidants, and these cannabinoids. If you take a CBD isolate, you're just getting one compound. Whereas if you take a whole plant formula, you're getting all these others, and they work synergistically. So it would be like, Mathea, you wouldn't say to somebody, broccoli is so good for you, and winter squash, they're so good for you, but here, I'm going to give you a vitamin A capsule, and that will be just as good. No, that's not just as good. You need all the other nutrients in the broccoli, and they do work synergistically.
I know we talked a little bit about practitioners kind of getting some questions. How do practitioners handle questions about cannabis? I mean, I know we have probably our own personal beliefs, but how do we help patients to understand it and what it can do? Where should people go to find more information?
Good question, because I think that we bring our own ideas into our counseling practice, and if we have a stigma against cannabis, people will either not talk to you about it, which that's not good. You want them to feel free to talk to you about these things. And if you don't know I can't expect all my fellow dietitians to know what I know about cannabis. I did training. I mean, I went through the Holistic Cannabis Academy, which is an online training, 35 modules with all the top experts in the field. So I devoted, almost a year to learning about this so I could do what I do. So I would only expect dietitians to know that there are medical benefits. Here are some of the conditions that it can help. If you have someone with Crohn's or ulcerative colitis or IBS or any of these conditions that I talked about, at least putting it out there and say, we can learn about this. I can refer you to somebody who knows about this that can help you figure out what might help you.
So can you talk a little bit about your training and why you felt the need to get certified versus just learning about it?
Yeah, I mean, I could have gone online and watched videos, but I really felt that if I were going to do what I'm doing and counseling clients and speaking, giving talks, I'm doing grand rounds at my local hospital in a couple of weeks, and I'm speaking at the annual meeting of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics in Washington, D.C. in October. So if I'm going to be, quote, the expert, I really felt that I needed to be certified. And luckily, at about the same time I was thinking about this, 2 dietitians, Donna Shields and Laura Logano, they started this Holistic Cannabis Academy. And they did all the work for pulling all the best speakers and developed a training program where I could learn what I needed to learn without going online. Because, as we know, a lot of the stuff online may or may not be 100% accurate. This way I know this is a good training program. I'm going to learn what I need so that then I can help others. But I have to say, I am still learning every day. Every day I'm learning more and more, and I get more and more excited. I've never been this excited about anything I've done in my career. I just find this so fascinating.
You're right. You can go find the information, and who knows who wrote it or whatever, but they've kind of got a filtered and educational process. So.
And I'm happy to talk to anyone who has questions about the program. And I actually have a discount code for dietitians if they want to do the training.
One question I always ask people is, what's your favorite food?
I just had it, actually. Avocado is probably my favorite. I mashed an avocado on an English muffin and put a fried egg on top with a little bit of cheese, and that was my lunch. I also like dark chocolate. I like really good Parmesan cheese. I know that's not one food, but I have to say, I could say my favorite food is CBD. That's what I should have said. I do take it every morning though. I have my own line, Jannabis Wellness CBD products, and I have tincture, soft gels, and salve. And every morning I take a 10 milligram soft gel with my breakfast and my multivitamin. And so that's my favorite food. The heck with those avocados. I like my CBD soft gels.
Well, I have taken CBD in the past, and the biggest thing that I noticed, in addition to some pain relief, was focus. And it's kind of a weird thing, but it was like all of a sudden I could stay at a task and complete the task without having the urge to go do, either other things on Facebook or whatever. Is that anecdotal to just me, or is that?
No. I've heard that before. And also the anti-anxiety benefit. I have a lot of clients who have gone off their anti-anxiety and antidepressants taking CBD. Now, I definitely don't recommend that people just stop cold turkey and switch to CBD. There is a way that you want to do that, and you need to, work with your doctor and healthcare professional, but you can absolutely taper off and substitute with CBD.
Well, great. Janice, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. It was a pleasure to have you on the show.
It was great chatting with you, Mathea. Keep up with all your wonderful work and getting the word out there about what dietitians are doing.
Well, I know that our listeners today have learned a lot about cannabis and probably have never even thought about half the things we talked about. So hopefully it stirs some in the brain. And if the listeners want to connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
Best way, just reach out via my website, jannabiswellness.com. I love to hear from people, and absolutely reach out.
Well, guys, this has been another great episode of the Nutrition Experts Podcast, the podcast that is all about learning more so you can do more with nutrition in your life.
You've just listened to an episode of the Nutrition Experts Podcast. Be sure to get more information about this week's episode at www.nutritionexpertspodcast.com. Tune in next time for another great conversation with a nutrition expert and expand your personal knowledge in the field of nutrition, one conversation at a time.